What's up, everybody? Mike Coluzzi here, Pro Tips to Grow Your Biz. As you guys know, I am an attorney, entrepreneur, business owner, and a coach who helps people get through career transitions, whether they are voluntary or involuntary, with confidence, clarity, and a defined sense of purpose. Because I know how scary it could be when you're contemplating that big move. So you can find me at MikeColuzzi.com, and you can shoot me an email at mike@mikecoluzzi.com, where you could say, hey, Mike, heard your podcast, and I would love to talk to you about what I'm doing. And I'd be more than happy to set up a complimentary call to see how I may be able to help you in your career transition. So each and every week, I have a lot of interesting guests from all over the country with different verticals, but there's one thing that most of them have in common, and that is they are business owners and entrepreneurs with a really interesting message. And today is no different. I have Steve Rothberg coming in today. He is the founder and chief visionary officer of CollegeRecruitercom. And Steve has a really interesting story. He started this company way back in 1991. And his core message is that he believes that every student and recent graduate deserves a great career. And I know in this climate, gosh, we all could use someone to help guide us through the landmines that are surely present out there, and give us all a leg up, and our friends and family members who have people who are coming out of college who are looking for clear direction. So if you go on CollegeRecruiter.com, you'll find that it is a job search site used by 5 million students and recent graduates who are looking to, again, find that part-time, seasonal internship, apprenticeship, and other entry-level jobs. That's something where Steve is going to shed some light on some real-time data on what the job market's like, what it's like owning his business, and give us some really important tips that we hope will benefit you. So welcome to the show, Steve.
Oh, thanks so much, Mike. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Well, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. So as obviously, you are unequivocally an expert in the field. You started in 1991, which is kudos to you for being able to remain in business and in one parallel for so many years. I know how challenging that is. So why don't you share a little bit about, your beginnings and what prompted you to start your own business, and some of the lessons you learned, wherein, hey, if you had to tell yourself back in 1991, some things you have told yourself, then that you now learned, and give us some insight on your journey.
Yeah, no sweat. So the earliest origins of the business date just a few years earlier than that. And this business I did start in 1991. So you're absolutely right about that. I had a micro business a few years earlier than that, in 1988, when I was a senior in college. So yes, I'm 57, for those of you who are trying to struggle with the math. But the micro business that I started in college, basically I published a map of the undergraduate campus that I went to, sold the advertising around the borders to restaurants, retailers, that kind of thing. Gave the maps for free to the university. The university gave the maps for free to their incoming students, their freshmen. And so I made my revenue came from the local retailers, restaurants, et cetera, that were buying the advertising, and my expenses were mostly printing graphic art. It was really, really fun. I did it for a few months. The idea was just to do it as a summer job in between undergrad and grad school. I ended up going to law school here in Minneapolis. And the business was a lot of fun, made good money, and came to law school, did well, graduated, was practicing in my first year. And the guy who took over my first business tried to get me to come back into it. And great guy, we're still really good friends today. But we just couldn't make the money work. He didn't have the cash flow to start paying me a salary, and I needed to put food on the table and pay the rent, kind of thing. So we ended up just saying, hey, this isn't going to work. But in the meantime, that entrepreneurial spark was blazing. And I was like, you know what? I don't really want to spend the next 5, 6, 7 years of my life being a lawyer and then getting out and starting my own small business, which was kind of my plan. I really want to just get going on this now. So I got the business basically restarted here in Minneapolis. So he was running the business that I had basically given to him in Winnipeg, in Canada, where I grew up and where he still lives. And I was running a somewhat similar business here in Minneapolis. So I was publishing maps of university colleges and universities, selling ads around the border. So pretty much the same kind of business. And then expanded it by creating an employment magazine in the mid 90s when magazines were still a thing. And the customers were mostly large employers that would buy recruitment advertising, employment ads in the magazine. And the magazine had, how to write a resume kinds of articles in it. Same kind of business model as the maps, gave the magazines for free to the universities, and they gave them for free to their graduating seniors. Then this thing called the internet came along. And so it was 1996. We created the first version of our website. So we went live the same year Yahoo went live. We went live 2 years before Google went live. It was the MySpace era. Wow. And the very first version of our website cost $3,000. A high school kid built it with assistance from his dad and his uncle. That kid is now a grown man with a family of his own and all that. You flash forward a few decades and that kind of thing happens. And we still work with the company that he now works for. So it's kind of fun. It's like after 3 decades, we're still working. We're still working sometimes directly with him and other times the people who sit in a cube next to him. So the business has really evolved. In 1996, when we created the first version of our website, I'd loved to sort of say that I was brilliant and had, the Midas touch and knew exactly where the world was going and we were all going to shift from print to online. Absolutely not. I thought that the website would be the sizzle that would help sell the steak. If you bought an employment ad in the magazine, we would also put your ad on the website. And boy, would that be cool. And oh, by the way, maybe we can charge you a little bit more for that. What ended up happening very quickly is that we realized, we don't have to wait 3 months to get an ad in the magazine. That's then going to run for 3 months. And 2 of those months, it might be out of date. It's, print has deadlines and things move about the speed of molasses. We're putting an ad up online. Somebody could call an ad in, pay over the phone with a credit card, and 12 minutes later, their ad's up on the website. And 14 days later, if they change the pay rate, we could just log in, change the update the pay, and everything was fine. So by 2000, we had transitioned the business and it was totally online and a job search site. So the best way of describing our site for people who aren't familiar with the job board industry is it's like Indeed or LinkedIn, or for those of us of a certain age, Monster or Career Builder, where candidates, job seekers will come to the site and they'll type in 1 or 2 or 3 keywords, maybe their desired job title, their major, something like that, and their desired location where they want to work. And then you hit submit and you get a list of job posting ads that come back to you. So the candidates use the site for free and employers are our customers. And your listeners have probably heard this expression elsewhere in some other contexts, but it's a double-sided marketplace. We basically have 2 different customer groups, candidates who we treat as customers but don't sell anything to them. And we also have employers that are very few compared to how many candidates there are. We'll have maybe a couple hundred employers using our site in a day where we'll have tens of thousands of candidates. But the employers are the ones that actually write us the checks. Right. So we have to be careful, because we're in a double-sided marketplace, of not favoring one group a lot more than the other. If you treat your candidates as well as any of them might want to be treated, just like everything is about the candidate, then you totally screw over the employer, because that would take you from just running a job posting ad to actually giving out like the cell phone number for the person who purchased the ad from you and giving that to like 2,000 candidates. Well, no employer wants that. On the other hand, if you favor the employers too much, then you really screw up the candidate. And so you really have to balance those interests. That's a lot harder than in a traditional business where you've got a single-sided marketplace. If you've got a landscaping business, you take care of the company or the homeowner. If you've got a restaurant, you take care of your customer that's coming in and ordering that steak dinner. So your focus can be on that customer, and you don't have to be balancing interests as much. But it's like you were saying, we have about 5 million students and recent grads who use our site a year, and they're using it to find employment. And one of the interesting things, I think, is how when I went to school, when Abraham Lincoln was president, the vast majority of students, 95%, were your stereotypical 18 to 22-year-olds. And that's just not the case anymore. They are the majority now, but it's about 60-40. About
Really?
40% of undergraduate students are career changers. They're ex-military, they're people who are in maybe their 40s, maybe they had kids young and they hit some kind of a ceiling at work. And if I can't get promoted without a bachelor's degree, well, I'm going to go back to school and get that bachelor's degree. That's becoming a lot more common.
You make a great point, because there's always perceptions about things, right? And most of us are limited. Our perception obviously is limited to the extent of our information, right? But so many of us make these prejudgments. So that's a really interesting point you just said there with respect to who the demographic is that are tying into your site. And I guess relative to just the listeners who are intrigued, obviously they can go to the site, and guys, you could just simply go to CollegeRecruiter.com to check it out. Are these temp to perm, or are they temp jobs? Like, what are the type of, employment opportunities that are there that people can expect?
Yeah, great question. So the way we describe it shorthand is anything that requires 0 to 3 years of experience. So it's the typical job that a student would have when they're currently enrolled. That might be, serving coffee at Starbucks, just, to kind of bring in cash so that they can buy pizza on the weekends. It's no longer the case that they can pay for their tuition and all that. It's just school's too expensive. They have loans. But, it can be a non-career related position like that. A lot of students work part-time or even full-time in Amazon, FedEx, UPS warehouses, for example. Even if they are going to be an engineer, their freshman and sophomore years, they might work in a warehouse because they're going to get 18 to 25 bucks an hour doing that, rather than, 14, 15 bucks an hour someplace else.
I'm sorry, go ahead. No, I was going to say, you mentioned that. No, go ahead, please.
I was going to say, and then the other piece that we have are going to be more than what we call an entry-level job. And that's going to be the job for the person who's graduated, maybe the first, second job after graduation. Those tend to be, with this audience, post-secondary, they tend to be what people would call white collar or professional.
I gotcha. So I think, in that vein, Steve, what would you say with respect to, are there preconceived notions relative to, say, some of those jobs, whether it be Amazon or FedEx? We hear on the outside what that experience is like. So what would you say, based upon your experience, what a person can reasonably anticipate with the types of jobs that are available in that type of environment? Do they have the flexibility? Because sometimes you hear, let's face it, you hear some horror stories about, oh my gosh, you have to work all these times and there's really time type restrictions. What type of insight could you give relative to that?
Yeah. So one thing, the qualifications to work in a very manual, labor intensive environment, like a warehouse as a package handler, or as somebody who's like loading the trucks, something along those lines. It's not for the faint of heart.
Right.
It's not for the person who is lazy or slow moving. It's not for somebody who feels that although they're the lowest person on the ladder in a 300,000 person organization, they know better than everybody else does. It is for somebody who wants to go to work, make a comparatively high hourly wage, certainly a lot more than you'd make in like a retail shop, who probably understands that at the end of your day of work, you definitely do not need to go to the gym because you've had your workout.
Right.
It's for somebody who doesn't mind kind of repetitive work, doing the same thing over and over again. So if you want to use your brain, you want to be creative, then the best thing you can do is not apply to begin with. It's not the environment. But on the other hand, if you are the kind of person who is maybe in school, saving for school, and you enjoy physical work, you can be on your feet all day, moving boxes, whatever, it can be, for somebody like that, a really, really great path, because a lot of those jobs, in addition to paying significantly more per hour, they also have significantly better benefits. Like a big thing that I know Amazon promotes it, but I don't hear people talking about it. And the same is true with UPS and FedEx. Their benefits are awesome. You get healthcare benefits day one. I mean, forget like a 30-day wait period. Forget your typical part-time job where you get health insurance and you get laughed out the door. It's like, we don't offer health insurance to our part-time workers. You go to work in those places, you have it from day one. That's a big deal. And especially when the work is, when the work is physical, you might need some health insurance. You might get injured. Now, workers' comp should cover some of that, or all of that, but still, it's a really good benefit. Yeah. Another thing that those sorts of jobs do, and I'm now sort of including also the stereotypical restaurant, hospitality, retail jobs that are part-time, they fit very well with the schedules of most students. So it's really typical for a post-secondary student to go from class to say 8 a.m. to 1 p.m., which is around the time that a lot of restaurants are opening, and they might take them an hour or two to get to work. And then they're there for the dinner and evening rush, maybe be a bartender, or if you're working at a hotel. A lot of those jobs have hours that work very well for students and recent grads.
That's really interesting. And so as far as those folks using your obviously database as a resource to get themselves started, and then do you find that most of your folks are they repeated customers, like the folks who are using your database? Or are they kind of, okay, they found their job and then they usually move on? Do you find that there's if you study your analytics as far as, return users and things like that, how's that play?
Yeah. So I'll talk about each of the customer groups separately. So the job seekers, it's a misnomer, or it's a pipe dream in the job board world, in the job search world, whether you're an Indeed or a LinkedIn or a smaller site like a CollegeRecruiter, or just even some tiny site that has 1,000 visitors a month. The vast majority of people search for a job infrequently, right? It's almost like buying a car or a house. It's not the kind of thing that most people do even once a year. Now, if the earlier you are in your career, typical teenager, early 20s, maybe a student, you are likely to search for a job more often than, say, somebody in their 40s or 50s. When you're in your 40s or 50s, it's pretty common you're going to be in that job for 4, 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah, I think that's usually is the average, and then it seems that the average person is through their career is typically going through about 12 to 14 different jobs.
Which sounds like a lot, but when you break it down and you say, you're going to work for probably 40, 50 years, it's like all of a sudden it's like, it's like your job lasts about as long as a typical car lasts. So,
and it kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier. And I think to speak to you from the perspective of you as an entrepreneur, a business owner, and your ability to stay in alignment without getting sucked into a diversion, or talk a little bit about, some of those trials and tribulations, because, a lot of the folks who I work with, oftentimes, particularly folks who have the dream and the vision of wanting to be on their own. Right. And I'll talk to them about like, okay, but I have a questionnaire that I usually go through to kind of go through the external and the internal factors that are implicating their thinking as to why they feel they want to go do that. And oftentimes
Mhm.
I'll say to them, like, is it a question of maybe realigning? Now, of course, there's what you're thinking, and realigning how you view the job. And I know for me, and I always talk to all the clients that I work with, like I use my own examples as learning tools for them. And I know that there's been price that I've paid for not having maybe a longer view or a different viewpoint, where I would emotionally attach to decisions without getting really objective feedback that forced me to move on. And so if you could speak to that, because again, I mean, I understand. I really find it extremely admirable that you've been able to stay in and at it consistently since, it's a long time, since 91.
Well, it is like 31 years. And yeah, the word that we use is relevant. That to stay in any for any business to stay relevant for 3 decades is an accomplishment. And we've never pivoted. Pivoting to me is not a negative, first of all, but pivoting is something that usually happens to, say, a startup, where they're just sort of finding their way. Who are our customers? What is it that we're really selling? We created this great product. It's being used really differently than we anticipated it being used, maybe by a different customer, maybe just, hey, they're actually not using our screwdriver as a screwdriver, but they're using it as a weapon. I mean, whatever. I mean, it's
Yeah,
just
right.
like
No,
weird things happen. So we've never done that. We've evolved. And for example, about 6 years ago, there was a start of a major change in our industry, where instead of employers doing what's called post and pray, where they pay a flat fee, like say $200 to run an ad for say 30 days. That was the model of advertising since advertising was created hundreds of years ago. But because of the ability of websites to track and to count clicks, when somebody on your website clicks on an ad to go over to the advertiser's website, now you can charge them for those clicks. And that started to sort of bleed into the employment world. And so you saw some sites like Indeed charging per click. We started to do that. And when we started to charge our customers per click instead of a flat fee, that fundamentally changed the way we did business. We needed different people. They had to have different skills. We needed a different process. When you run an ad for 30 days, the ad starts running and you kind of ignore it for 30 days, and then your technology just pulls it down and you're done. When you're being paid per click, you have to be watching it all the time. Are we delivering too many clicks? Are we not delivering enough? Are the clicks good quality? Are they not? So it's a lot more involved.
Right.
And the financials really changed too, because the risk of the ad working or not working shifted from our customer to us. So our business really fundamentally changed, evolved. Another big change that happened to me personally was that over the last couple of years, we've really built out. My wife and I own 100% of the company. She's the 51%. She's the CEO. Thank goodness. She's good at managing. I'm terrible at managing. She loves managing. I hate managing. So we all have our strengths and weaknesses, and boy, do I have weaknesses. But I guess I've become aware enough of them and prepared to do something about it, that it's worked out well for us. So I've been able to focus more and more of my work on being what we call the visionary, the chief visionary officer. Some of your listeners might be familiar with the Entrepreneur's Operating System, EOS.
Yes.
It's basically a framework.
Gino Wickman, right?
Exactly.
Traction.
Yep. Traction. So
it's a phenomenal
it's
book.
A way of like running your business, and everything is built around like 90-day cycles, because those of us who are ADD can't keep track of anything for more than 90 days. And those who aren't ADD still can't keep track of anything for more than, it's like, so it's like heads down, focus on taking one step at a time. You're not going from A to Z. You're going from A to B, and then you're going from B to C. And it brings remarkable clarity. Everybody in the organization knows what they're supposed to be doing and by when In most organizations, your boss will come to you and will be like, hey, Mike, I'd like you to call on customer XYZ. And you say, sure, no problem. And then your boss walks away and you say, well, I think I'll probably call her in September. And your boss in the meantime is thinking, he's supposed to call her now, like right freaking now.
Right.
And it's not that you were unreasonable or she was unreasonable, but you didn't have that clarity. And if you don't end up calling that customer, you should be held accountable for that. If you do call the customer and you get a great sale out of it, you should be accountable for that. So accountability isn't just about the stick, it's also about the carrot. So
it is an excellent book, and it's an excellent system. I agree. So you were an implementer of it, right? And you're the visionary, your wife's the integrator.
Yeah, exactly. So that's exactly right. And so we just absolutely followed that. And what it's allowed me to do is to really change the work that I personally do. So now, rather than being involved in the trenches and trying to create process, doing all the things that other people are much better at and enjoy a heck of a lot more, now I focus much more on, well, things like this. One of our core values is to be a thought leader and to share some of the knowledge that we've gained over the years. And that's why you and I are talking. Hopefully I've done one or two of those things.
You've done, and it's really interesting. And I think it gives people a lot of perspective. And these are the things that when I talk to folks relative to, particularly when they're contemplating a career move or a change. I went down the entrepreneurial small business path. It obviously had some benefits. It obviously has its drawbacks. There's nothing in life that doesn't have, the yin and the yang. But I think as far as one of the things that you talk about, that if a person as a leader or has the ability to be able to make a connection to understand the importance of that detached viewpoint of the growth trajectory or of whether there is a visionary or there's an integrator, or even having a better understanding, like I said, of repurposing their mindset associated with how they view their employment. And I always introduce this concept of a lot of people don't understand the concept of intrapreneurship as opposed to entrepreneurship. And I tell that to folks all the time, that before you make this seismic shift, right? How could you improve your current role? How could you become more of a value add person? How can you, how do you reevaluate your role as you're a business owner unto yourself, and your employer is your client? Those are all things that they're mindset shifts. Now you are proactive and very,
not shy.
Well, you're not, but you're very proactive as far as adapting, right? And implementing strategies that are going to keep you in business for 31 years, which is, it's rare. I mean, because let's face it, there are situations where people, unfortunately, they just don't have that type of flexibility and or leadership that allows for that type of growth and also just realignment of purpose so that people stay in their job longer or they don't look, because they feel that this is creating an opportunity for them where they could manifest their true potential, So it's very interesting that you shared that. And it's great, because I always talk to folks always about Gino Wickman's books, Dan Sullivan's books, Donald Miller's books. Those are great, great, great authors to kind of help people get alignment with understanding of these fundamentals. So I
think the vast majority of business books should be pamphlets. They're like 300 pages long, and there's like 3 bullet points that really come out of them. These books that you've mentioned are different. They're fun and easy to read, and every page is like, oh wow, okay, there's something else. There's something else. It's not just the same regurgitated nonsense page
I
after
agree.
page.
And I think and I think what's great about the books too is that they are, they have takeaway worksheets,
Yeah.
and like a lot of the folks who I work with who are, who never really owned their business before, I run them through Donald Miller's Business Made Simple. And we use that as a template because, for them to understand, oftentimes when I work with folks, I have a questionnaire and I ask them obviously what their primary goals are, where their obstacles are, what have you, kind of go through like a preliminary kind of SWOT analysis. And invariably, the reason that, the things that they state when they first start, once they begin to understand the process of, understanding the dynamics of what being a business owner means in its totality, their answers change quite a bit, and their timetables change. And, I always talk to folks, about, KPIs, how they're individualized, particularly in scenarios where, obviously there's certain people who are familiar with those concepts. Oftentimes I find people who are very like operational and they're looking at the KPI scenario from a pure, quantitative value. When they're shifting and they have to maybe embrace what they're doing to become a business development, or their orientation towards sales, which are more qualitative qualities as far as your mindset, right? And how to judge them. So these are really, these books stand as great foundations. So this was a really interesting conversation. And, I know when we first started, we were talking before we went live where the conversation will go, and I think it went to some really interesting places, which is really great. So as we wrap up, what would you say would be, obviously there's the website there. You've done a great job explaining kind of what it is that you offer to folks. So is there anything else that you'd want to kind of impart on the audience that would bring value to, what you're looking to drive home, and something that you think would be a good takeaway for the folks listening?
Yeah, great. Thank you for the opportunity. As I've gotten older, it's become kind of more obvious to me that life is not about the job title. Life is not about the house that you live in or the neighborhood or any of those things. I think it really boils down to three things. And that is, be happy, pay your bills, and leave the world a little bit better than you found it. And if your career, if your personal life can help you accomplish all three of those things, what else is there?
Right. Well, those are good, really basic questions, or basics, principles that I think do go a long way. And I think many of us do get lost in some of the external entrapments, let's say. And then we realize that there are more important things. But, the beautiful thing about life is that there's different personalities, different types of personality traits, and aligning yourself with people whom are complementary to your personality trait, so that there can be more alignment and harmony as opposed to conflict, always goes obviously a long way. So guys, I've been talking to Steve Rothberg. He is the Chief Visionary Officer and founder of CollegeRecruiter.com. It is really one of the premier places for you if you have people who are in your life, say, who are in college, looking for a opportunity to create income with solid job opportunities. It is a great resource for them to check out, register, and get a job that is going to allow them to move forward so they can realize their potential in their college careers and beyond. So Steve, thank you so much for being here on Pro Tips to Grow Your Biz. You shared a lot of really great practical tips and insight, and I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much, Mike. It was a lot of fun.
All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you soon.